Okay, I've been told I got to hurry with lunch awaiting. This is no debate. I agree with everything was just said. It's just a matter of perspective. I haven't been able to win a debate with Jazz since I tried to convince him that baseball is a legitimate sport. And it's not just rugby and soccer. These are my disclosures. I have obviously a long-time atherectomy user. This we know, calcium is prevalent. The population gets older. Diabetes is rampant. More calcium. Calcium leads to worse outcomes. You've seen this data previously. All the p-values, this is from Mount Sinai, it's got to be true. Everything is worse. And when you go to the meta-analysis, including all the others, it's also worse with calcium. So no question that calcium is a problem and inhibits us from both delivery, expansion, and optimizing our stents. Complications due to calcium. I won't go through this. But we do know that once you see that there's over a 270-degree arc of calcium, stent expansion is almost always going to be incomplete or asymmetric. So it's an independent predictor of stent thrombosis particular. ROTA we know we can use and be safe and effective, providing good clinical outcomes. Not a lot of randomized data. The pre-calc trial gives you a combination of ROTA versus modified balloon like scoring and cutting. You can see that the p-values were significant for strategy success. There was a lot of crossover as a result of not being able to just do it with a balloon or crossing with a balloon, and a lot of other features. But the result of that is that ROTA gives us an advantage compared to those. This has been shown already. It's part of your algorithm as based on the SCNI presentation, including mechanical, laser, and intravascular lithotripsy. Before lithotripsy was even introduced into the US market, it had a role in the SCNI algorithm. So that tells you that people were very high on it, as I am. The Optimum trial, as was presented last night, this is surgical turndowns, variety of operators. We were like the fourth leading enrollers for this particular trial, lots of surgical turndowns, 27% with hemodynamic support, atherectomy 32%. You have to be able to take on these kind of high-risk cases with lots of calcification and really optimize imaging on top of this for people whose average syntax scores were 32, total lesion lengths of 74, and CTOs over 50%. So a huge amount of difficult disease here. The predicted rates of mortality were met basically at 30 days. So we can get equivalent to what would have been predicted and do it by percutaneous means. We know that imaging helps us. Just seeing it on the angiogram may not be enough. You can tell severe when it's severe because it's up there. That means it's got to have over 180 degrees. Moderate and mild is more difficult. So this is required sometimes that imaging may help you with preparations and determination what to do. I would try to base our utilization more logically on what's an index score that helps us with this. The angle as determined by OCT or IVUS gives you a couple of points. Thickness, greater than 0.5, lengths greater than 5 millimeters. And once you really get to a certain point, and we'll see the cut point, this is the IVUS equivalent of that, 270, 360s, nodules, vessel diameter less than 3.5. And once you get to the point of having at least two or more of these, you have to start considering atherectomy. If you look at a IVUS to predict underexpansion, the D group is no angiography calcium cohort. The atherectomy group is C, and then the validation and derivation is A and B. These numbers clearly show that atherectomy will basically kind of neutralize the inhibition of stent expansion, and that's what you'd take away from this. And that cut point, as we said, is somewhere around a calcium score of 2. Here's a case example. This lesion doesn't look that bad. It's IFR positive. On the IVUS pullback, you can see that there is calcium showing up right there. There it's over 180, maybe 270 degrees. The operator elects not to do with it and get away with it. And although the IFR was normalized, because of the incomplete expansion of the stent that you see on IVUS, you're going to be at higher risk for restenosis, if not a frank stent thrombosis. So I'll give you one case. This is going to seem like St. Louis's most famous philosopher is Yogi Berra. He said it's like deja vu all over again. You'll see what I mean in a second here. Previous cabbage, CTO with a right coronary, having lots of angina. And here you have an issue where you can't even get the guide catheter coaxial on the right coronary. So trying to get this and advance a wire is very challenging. It's coming in as an angle, as you can see in the RAO. After a number of wires, we're able to get a Judo 6 to go through a serpentine advancement and get it distal. So it looks like we're in good shape. The wire is distal. We're home free, right? No problems. Straight shot, nothing to do. Okay, the microcatheter doesn't go. 1 millimeter balloons doesn't go. What do I do now? I can't do shockwave. I can't even do atherectomy, or can I? What's my only option here if I don't have any backup and support to drive any through there? Well, I have to use a laser, okay? That's the only thing I'm going to track over an 014 wire. 70/70 fluence and pulse, 50/50 contrast, and that doesn't work. So I got no other choice. Go back to another laser. 38 laser trains. It's a new indoor record. Just to get enough fracturing. Now, laser does not ablate calcium, but it's going to fracture it enough to get things through. The Mamba, the microcatheter passes, but now a balloon will not. So I'm still stuck. Does this sound familiar? 125 rotablated burr. Bill, I know you don't like this, but nothing else was going to go through there safely. It looked like a mess when I took the angiogram. We got that through, and then after laser, rota, multiple balloons, and a shockwave, Guidezilla, IVUS, and DES, this is what we end up with the final results. This is 3 hours worth of work. It doesn't show it in a 2-minute presentation. But this is very similar to the case you saw, and the need for bringing in multiple modalities that are not antagonistic for the most part. They are synergistic. Believe me, if I could get a balloon down with a shockwave, I'll take that every time. But most of the time, I've got to couple it up with at least an NC balloon, and if not, frank atherectomy, followed by balloons, and then maybe a shockwave on top of that. OCT can do the same thing in terms of predicting just how many points you get, looking at deep, superficial, and nodular calcium. Again, we can go down this algorithm. Notice not all pathways lead to IVL. It actually has some other things that you can go through that determine whether it's crossable or not. This looks like a simple lesion. We do OCT on it. It looks like the calcium is superficial. The arc is 360 degrees, so we get points there. The calcium thickness is 1.3, points there, and a length that's almost 10 millimeters, so another point. 4 points total. This didn't look bad to you, but you really need to do some form of either IVL or atherectomy. The question is, will the balloon cross or not? And that's where it comes down to the important bifurcation in our strategy. Turns out the balloon did cross. Now we can take on the calcium. We'll size for success, 1:1, 3 millimeter by 15 millimeter IVL. Here I am debating IVL, and I'm doing it instead of atherectomy, only because I've got a rational way of looking at it in terms of imaging. The fracture was taking place. This is the lithotripsy. Many times you'll see the balloon inflate right in front of your eyes, even though it's only 4 atmospheres. As it begins to fracture, we can see that there are fracture planes here in the OCT. And now that we've done that and fractured it and changed the compliance, you go ahead and stent, and you end up with a good result. Final OCT shows a good expansion, optimization of your results. So conclusions, calcium is the most significant deterrent to a positive outcome in complex coronary disease. High calcium scores, meaning generally above 2, portend trouble, poor outcomes. You've got to take these into consideration. The algorithm is very helpful in choosing. Yeah, if you can cross primarily with these high calcium score type lesions with IVL, go ahead, do it. But for the most of the part, you're going to need some adjunct, at least a high pressure inflation, if not atherectomy, coupled with IVL, so-called rototripsy, other type things. This is what we do. We don't have atherectomy randomized studies to really bonify this, but believe me, try to do that case without it, there's no way it's going to happen. That's unfortunately mostly what's referred to me from the outside. Thank you very much.